Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a moving, documentary-style journey to uncover how a single, localized crack in a concrete wall triggered the rapid collapse of a global superpower. We're looking at one of the most astonishing periods in modern history, a moment when the world order shifted literally overnight. Over the next few minutes, we're going to walk through the timeline, the intense pressures, and the remarkable human stories that unraveled an entire empire.
So, let's jump right in by asking the central question that drives this entire historical ripple effect. How exactly does a physical barrier in one European city lead to the total collapse of the mighty Soviet Union just 2 years later? I mean, it wasn't magic, and it certainly wasn't just a sudden whim. It was the explosive climax of decades of tension. To truly grasp it, we have to put ourselves right in the middle of the action on a chilly night in late 1989.
Just picture this scene. It's November 9th, 1989. For nearly 3 decades, East and West Germans had been completely separated by this massive, imposing barrier. We're talking families torn apart, friends who hadn't seen each other in years, an entire nation fractured. But on this specific night, thousands of people suddenly rushed the border checkpoints. Imagine the dust flying through the air, the sound of hammers striking concrete, and just a sea of waving German flags as citizens physically climbed on top of the wall. The world watched in awe as one of the Cold War's most powerful symbols crumbled right beneath the feet of everyday people.
To really understand the sheer magnitude of this collapse, we need to step back. Section 1. A divided Europe. Look at this incredible contrast. In East Berlin, you had a world defined by heavily armed soldiers, imposing guard towers, endless barbed wire, and families tragically cut off from their loved ones. And then, literally right next door, you have West Berlin, bursting with bustling city life and vibrant streets. You had 2 entirely different worlds, sitting shoulder to shoulder, locked in a ridiculously tense standoff.
1961. That is the crucial year this physical division became absolute. It's when East German workers actually constructed the Berlin Wall. And here's the thing, it wasn't built to keep enemies out. It was built specifically to stop its own citizens from fleeing the East for a better life in the West. That massive concrete barrier was essentially a highly visible admission of a failing system trying to physically trap its own populace. Fast forward to the 1980s, and all of this pressure really starts building. Section 2. Crisis inside the Soviet Union.
By the 1980s, you've got an absolute pressure cooker of domestic issues. Workers are struggling in industrial plants with massively declining productivity. Citizens are standing in impossibly long lines outside grocery stores, just hoping to get basic necessities like bread or milk. Add to that the crippling cost of the Soviet military machine trying to keep pace in a global arms race. This widespread public dissatisfaction wasn't just a fleeting mood, it was a harsh, daily reality, driven by a deeply stagnant economy that simply couldn't provide for its people anymore.
To relieve this intense pressure, a new leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, steps in. He introduced 2 vital reforms intended to modernize the struggling system. First, glasnost, which means openness, and second, perestroika, meaning restructuring. Gorbachev gave these sweeping speeches and held government meetings trying to fix the failing economic charts and loosen political censorship. He was honestly trying his hardest to save the system, but in doing so, he cracked the foundation and unintentionally opened the door to its complete unraveling. This internal weakening empowered mounting protests that spread like wildfire across East Germany. Which brings us to Section 3. The Berlin Wall crumbles.
Remember that dramatic scene from 1989 we talked about a minute ago? Well, the immediate spark wasn't some grand military victory. It was literally a bureaucratic mistake. There was massive confusion over newly announced travel regulations. During a live press conference, an East German official actually misspoke. This led the public, and even the border guards themselves, to mistakenly believe the heavily fortified borders were open immediately, without any restrictions. Facing overwhelming, chanting crowds, the heavily armed guards were completely confused and just gave up, unexpectedly opening the checkpoints.
And once those border gates opened, history changed in an absolute instant. Suddenly, crowds are crossing freely, you've got musicians performing in the streets, joyful tears as families are reuniting after decades apart, and television reporters broadcasting this miracle live to the entire globe. Fireworks are lighting up the sky over this newly reunited, jubilant crowd. The impossible had just happened.
The momentum was just unstoppable at this point. ordinary citizens took matters into their own hands, physically breaking the wall into pieces with whatever they could find: hammers, pickaxes, you name it. It was dynamic, it was highly emotional, and it fundamentally symbolized the fall of the Cold War's most potent barrier.
But remember, the wall was just a symptom of a much larger system. It was merely the first domino, sparking fierce independence movements that gained massive momentum across all the Soviet republics. Section 4. The Soviet Empire dissolves. The timeline of this collapse is staggeringly fast. We start in 1989 with the destruction of the wall. Just a little over a year later, in mid-1991, hardliners stage a desperate coup against Gorbachev to try and stop his reforms. The coup fails, but it drastically weakens Gorbachev's central government. By December 1991, the final shoe drops. The entire Soviet Union is officially dissolved. Just think about that for a second. From the fall of the wall to the complete erasure of a global superpower in just about 2 years.
During the sheer chaos of that failed 1991 coup, with military units standing by in the streets and parliamentary debates raging, a new key political figure emerged front and center: Boris Yeltsin. Yeltsin literally stood on a tank outside the government buildings, courageously rallying the crowds and waving the national flag. Meanwhile, Gorbachev's central influence fatally and permanently waned in the background. The entire power dynamic had completely shifted.
Following Gorbachev's resignation speech, the red Soviet flag was quietly lowered over the Kremlin for the very last time in history. In its place, the Russian flag was raised. This quiet, deeply symbolic exchange of flags in the cold December wind marked the exact moment the former republics officially became independent, sovereign states. The Soviet Union was simply no more.
And that brings us to the ultimate macro-level consequence. Section 5, a new global order.
So why does all this history matter so much to us today? Because the events in Berlin were the symbolic end of the Cold War, but the dissolution of the USSR that followed completely transformed global politics. It abruptly terminated decades of intense, nuclear-shadowed superpower rivalry, and it created the new, interconnected, international political order we largely live in today. We went from a divided globe teetering on the edge of mutually assured destruction to a map of peaceful European cityscapes and a reunified Germany.
Ultimately, this teaches us a vital lesson. Seemingly immovable political systems, no matter how many guard towers they build or how vast their military is, are absolutely no match for the combined, converging forces of deep economic strain and an overwhelming public will for freedom. When the people finally decide they have had enough, even concrete and iron must give way.
I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. We just watched an empire that dominated half the globe vanish in a mere 24 months. If a superpower of that magnitude can unravel so quickly, what does that mean for the geopolitical giants and empires of our world today?